So yes, we have a new update here, saying in the back channel here that they're currently undergoing an open loop test of the system on the range that is used to send the destruct signal to the rocket. So, um, you want to talk us through, what exactly all that means there, Philip? Because I know that you've been following this all night, especially the last few minutes with the range issues. So
This is part of the system that as the update was saying that we got from Alex in the back, it's part of the system that actually communicates the signals to the flight termination system.
exactly all that means there. We have a new update here. I said, I know we have a lot of new people joining. If you want to ask us a question, tag us in chat with @NASA Spaceflight. It's going to put it into some
That, and now that we're just waiting to hear if the range is go for launch. Not officially, but because they won't get pulled for a little while longer, but just are they ready to go? So I know it sounds like we're getting an update from launch control right now.
yeah. Yeah, so while we wait for that update to come in real quick, I do want to just quickly remind everybody, as I said, I know we have a lot of new people joining. If you want to ask us a question, tag us in chat with @NASA Spaceflight. It's going to put it into some fancy software that Michael's developed for us so we can put it up on screen and maybe answer it. So yes, we have a new update here, saying in the back channel here that they're currently undergoing an open loop test of the system on the range that is used to send the destruct signal to the rocket. So, you want to talk us through, what exactly all that means there, Philip? Because I know that you've been following this all night, especially the last few minutes with the range issues. So
This is part of the system that as the update was saying that we got from Alex in the back, it's part of the system that actually communicates the signals to the flight termination system. I'm looking at the updates here because again, those are the two issues that we're dealing with, which is we're dealing with, they're a little behind on because of the leak on the mobile launcher that they fixed, but they're still catching up with the loading the liquid hydrogen on the ICPS, and then this range safety issue with a basically the network that all the computers that communicate with this system that helps send that, those would be an arm and a destruct signal from the range safety officer if you needed to do that. They basically, as the update was saying, they're basically retesting their systems after they replaced this Ethernet switch, and this might be one of those, like a 1U rack or even a virtual switch type of an Ethernet switch versus something that you might go out and get at Best Buy, although maybe you can get one of those at Best Buy, but it's a more complicated switch probably than like a 4-port gigabit Ethernet switch. So they're still, and so the update on the ICPS, getting that full, they're still not full yet. They're still they have not reached the topping phase. I guess they were saying they were around 80% and they were doing a test. So they're still a little ways away. And so, yeah, if the launch team was going to hit the opening of the window, they would need to pick up in about 10 minutes. And it doesn't sound like they're going to make that. And so at this point, I think they're still trying to figure out how much more time the range needs to deal with their computers and how much time it's going to take to get the ICPS into a ready to pick up terminal count. So we're still waiting to hear when that's going to be. But they have 2 hours to work with, and so these issues shouldn't take 2 hours to resolve. So, and the weather sounds like, at least last we heard, that the weather was still reasonably good, and so we'll just be waiting to get some sense of when they think they can pick up the clock.
Yeah, and
Uh,
oh, Thomas, you had something to say?
Yeah, just something to follow on to that as we get into, like you said, they want to get ICPS into stable replenish, a stable configuration, and there might be some set amount of time it needs to be in that configuration before they can pick up the count. Is there anything that teams might be not necessarily worried about, but looking at closely when the vehicle is just, I mean, the core stage has been sitting in stable replenish for a while now. Is there any limiting factors to how long the vehicle can be sitting in that configuration while other issues like the range issue, for example, are worked, or is that all well within the 2 hour launch window that they already have?
I think I think that the core stage is in this is kind of a stable configuration where they are and really with the vehicle. And so yeah, the vehicle, other than the fact that again they just because of the leak that they had, they're basically catching up on finishing the hydrogen filling of both stages, and in this case it's the ICPS stage. But the vehicle otherwise can kind of sit in this configuration at T-minus 10 minutes and holding through the entire 2 hour launch window. So it's really just, we were getting we're getting the updates from Alex in the back here, and basically what he's saying, what he's relaying from launch control is it doesn't look like they're going to make the opening of the window, but it doesn't sound like it still sounds like it's going to be a matter of minutes. I might be over promising here, but it doesn't seem like we're talking about hours to get to a ready to go configuration now. So we'll just have to see. At this point, though, I think from a vehicle standpoint, I'm kind of curious how long. You were talking about that, Thomas. How long do they need to be in stable replenish for the ICPS before they would be ready to pick up the count and go for launch? So, we're still waiting for both of those, but they're both going to be critical in terms of when we're going to get a T0. So, and that's what we heard in the back was basically launch control said we'll get back to you with a T0 when we have it. So I think it's still a question as to when that's going to happen.
Indeed. And Philip, question that I have for you is that whenever they do go ahead and proceed into terminal count, are they going to give that to us in an update? How are they going to indicate to us that they're getting ready to go into terminal count? What's that process like for preparing for terminal count?
When they're ready, so this is actually this won't be quite so. This will probably happen in a more a more expeditious manner. I think if everything was nominal and they'd come into this and were thinking they were going to be ready to go right at the opening of the window, then they would take their time with these polls. But I think really what they're going to want to do in the name of saving as much time as they can is once they know that they have once they know they're in a good configuration, then there will be two polls. There will be a launch team poll that will be conducted by the NASA test director, and then there will be a poll of some of the launch team and the range and the weather officer and management by Charlie Blackwell Thompson, who's the launch director. And we'll be listening for that second poll, because if everybody is go in her poll, then she will give the final go to launch the vehicle, and once she does that, they will pick up the count at 10 minutes. They have a little, maybe they have a little bit of flexibility there, but what I suspect is we're going to be listening in once they give us the launch team audio. Hopefully they'll do that. And they said they were going to give it to us at L minus 15 minutes, but at this point that is kind of a meaningless thing, because we're not, I don't know that we're going to know when we're at L minus 15 minutes except in hindsight. So we're going to be listening to get that poll, and as opposed to sort of a more nominal countdown, it might be that when she gives the go to pick up the count, they pick up the count less than a minute later. It could be very quickly from your go to continue the count to when they pick up the countdown. So like I said, we're not sure when we're going to get the launch team audio, but that would be a good sign, because hopefully at that point then we'll get a very essentially real-time updates from the launch team about what's going on. So, and we're just going to have to wait and see when they get to that point.
Yes. Yeah, so definitely getting close, and Alex made a good point in the back channel here saying, that if they were to try and hit the beginning of the window, which, if correct me if I'm wrong, is at 1:04 a.m. Eastern, if they were to hit that window, then that poll that Philip was just talking about should be happening now. And we have no indication of that happening. So definitely doesn't look like they're going to be making the beginning of the window here. But we do have a few questions here that I did want to hit on. Here we go. So I think we might have hit on this quickly earlier, but we have a question here asking, can you explain what a launch window means?
At the launch times for other launch opportunities later in the window, not all of the windows are exactly 2 hours, but either way, it comes down to vehicle performance, comes down to where you're going. Can also come down to things like range availability. I mean, it's not practical to keep the range closed off for a launch event for 8 straight hours or something like that. As much as that might be accommodating to the mission, that's closing airspace in the area, that's committing range personnel to being on console for eight plus out more than 8 hours realistically. So there are other factors that influence how long you can basically reserve for a launch attempt. But the driving factor is physics, and while the team would definitely prefer to be launching in day, I know we've talked about this before, because that gives you some extra imagery, gives you some extra data in that sense, especially for a test flight like this. The fact is, it's not worth delaying the mission significantly until the moon is in the right place where you can launch during the day to postpone this test flight. They can get a lot of data already, even without daytime views, and the NASA teams have all pretty much unanimously agreed that that's not an issue that would prevent them from taking these launch opportunities, even though they're in the middle of the night. Comes down to every mission. Operational missions will have even less constraints. Test flights also have extra objectives and things to make sure you get as much data as possible on that first flight before you move into the more operational missions.
Yep, there you go. And it does look like we have an update here, given to us in the back channel that upper stage, which is that ICPS, liquid hydrogen is now topping. Also, the range safety officer is testing the flight termination system, which is that system that will terminate the rocket during ascent if anything were to go wrong. And then one more thing, the launch team is currently determining a new launch time for the rocket. So, of course, we've had those delays that have pushed back the launch into the window, but it looks like they might be getting ready to figure out when they're actually going to launch this thing, which is super, super, super exciting. Going to keep it going here with some questions. A good, interesting one. I know we had it up on the screen a few minutes ago, but Jay asking, what is the advantage of a mobile launch tower rather than a fixed service structure at the pad? Of course, SLS rolled out with that mobile launch tower, which is that tall tower behind it. But during the Saturn V era, Philip, I know that there was a fixed tower, or actually, no, there wasn't. But during the shuttle era, excuse me, there was a fixed service structure at the pad. Why didn't they opt to do that with SLS?
I mean, I think I think it. Part of the reason is, looking at just, you want to minimize the amount of time. You see this with with other service providers, and the SpaceX is kind of flexible, but they have depending on which pad. So pad 39A, they have a fixed service tower there, but it's probably used mostly just for crew access. But I don't believe that I don't know how much of a fixed service tower that they have at Pad 40, for instance, or at Vandenberg. And so the thing about having a large tower that's out at the pad all the time is you have to keep service and maintenance on it, and it's out in that salt spray 365 days of the year, and there isn't that much of a reason to to do the checkout and maintenance of a rocket outside. And so they were really hoping with this vehicle, and I know we have a launch control update coming here, but the idea is for this, they wanted this vehicle, they wanted to test and check it out in the VAB, roll it out and launch it. And so it's taking them a long time for this one, but eventually they would like to be getting to a point where they're basically only out at the pad for about a week. And so basically they're just launch controls confirming that they aren't going to make the opening of the window, because we passed that point now by a couple of minutes. And so they are, obviously going to stay. They're going to keep the clock holding at T-minus 10 minutes, and they're still estimating how long it's going to take. Upper stage being in topping means that they're very close to getting into replenish, and then it's a question of how long they need to stay in replenish. And then again, they're testing that range system that transmits the commands to the flight termination system. And so it's just a question of how long is it going to take to finish, get the ICPS ready, and how long it takes to finish and get the range computers ready. So we're waiting to hear. I guess we're still waiting to hear. When they say they're extending the hold, that means that they don't know what the new T0 time is yet. So we're still waiting to see how long it's going to take. But just again to remind everybody, we have 2 hours. So the launch window runs from 1:04 a.m. Eastern to 3:04 a.m. Eastern. So we haven't reached the T0 time yet, but they would have to pick up the clock 10 minutes before that. But we still have 1 hour and 57 minutes of window to work with here. And so they can launch anytime all the way up to 3:04 a.m. Eastern, which is 8:04 a.m. UTC.
Now, quick question, Philip. When they go ahead and start courting a new T0, do they just do they command a release of the hold, or do they select a T0 time and then the hold gets released accordingly for, in this case, 10 minutes beforehand?
Good question. I think the way that this system works, that they can put in a resume time for the ground launch sequencer, which is going to be controlling most of the final 10 minutes of the count. Because what happens is down at 33 seconds when they do that handoff, if when they get to that point, the ground launch sequencer will then give that T0 time to the rocket, to the SLS flight computers. And so it doesn't do that until the handoff. So you could pick up at 10 minutes, for instance, and count down part of the way, stop, hold for a few minutes, and then continue and resume. So they have a little bit of flexibility there. And so, again, if we get close to the end of the window, which hopefully we don't, these issues, at least at this point, don't sound like it's going to take the entire 2 hours of the window. But if they got into a time crunch, they could pick up the clock relatively quickly. I think the issue, and they used to do this in shuttle, would be if they were getting into a time crunch, those polls that we talked about, they would basically get those essentially almost all the way out of the way. They'd basically pull the entire launch team. And if there were, if we were talking about, again, like the upper stage and range, they might just leave those two open, make sure everybody else was go, and then as soon as those two positions reported they were go, they just pick the clock up. I don't think they're going to do that in this case, but they could pick things up and go in a hurry if they needed to. So, but this is going to be kind of a seat of the pants, do this relatively quickly. So I'm kind of hoping that we'll get the launch team audio here, relatively soon. I think I'm probably being too optimistic about that, but I think that's kind of, they'll play it based on how much time they have left in the window. With 2 hours, they can go at a little bit more of a relaxed pace. I think one of the things that happens if we get, an hour into the window, 45 minutes into the window, is that they're really going to lose the ability to even to recycle if they were to have an issue. We were talking about you can go down to a certain time inside of 10 minutes. If they have an issue inside of 10 minutes and really inside of 6 minutes, they're just not going to have enough time, depending on how far we go with these problems. They're not going to have enough time to recycle tonight. So now that doesn't mean that they're going to be forced to recycle. So it's just a question of, I'm sure they would take it if they got down to the end of the window and they only had one shot tonight. I'm sure they take it. So I don't think they're going to necessarily worry about whether there's a potential for a recycle. It's just a question of we're still just waiting to hear when they're estimating the new T0 time, and we'll worry about the rest of it. But I also do think what they have left to do in terms of polls and things like that before they pick up the clock, they're probably not going to waste a whole lot of time on that. They're going to try and do that as quickly as they can.
Yeah, the other factor to put into all of this, and this would have been some information that the team would have actually received yesterday, I believe, is launch cutouts. They have times throughout this 2-hour window where
That's a good point.
There are collision on launch assessments, or COLA window, where basically the launch trajectory would take some parts of the spacecraft too close to vehicles that are already on orbit. Most of those cutouts last, like a second or two, because things moving at orbital velocity get out of the way pretty quickly. For things that are larger or higher risk, such as the International Space Station, sometimes a COLA window can last a minute or two. They're pretty small cutouts, and there's only a handful of them throughout the window. So when they're looking at new T0, they will not only evaluate the readiness of the vehicle and the teams to pick up the countdown, but they'll also see, okay, if we're going to get ready to be resuming here, when we reach T0, are we in a COLA cutout? And obviously, if they are, they'll just push it till after that cutout window. So they'll check those as well.
Right, and I believe actually that they have the capability in the software to load all of those COLAs into the software. We were told, I think there were something on the order of about 56 of them, and like you said, they range from a couple seconds to maybe a minute in duration. But they can load those into the ground launch sequencer such that if they wanted to pick up the clock, they could basically put that command in, and then the software would figure out when's the next possible time I could pick up. So, if you were to have some COLAs kind of stacked up in a short period of time, like within a 10-minute space of time, then they will obviously they will work with that. They already know where those are, and they'll look at those before they were to consider picking up the clock. So if there were a period within this 2 hours where you had a sort of a knot or a bunch of these cutouts, they would probably just look to push to the other side of that. So, but that is a really good point. And so yeah, they have some of that already sort of prepared, and then some of it they'll just look at. They're probably looking at that right now, and they already know, okay, if we get to this point in the window, then we'll just we'll just hold to the other side of that. So, but we're probably only talking about a few minutes, and it might not even be a consideration yet.
Definitely. Well, the farther we get into the night, the closer we get to the launch of this thing. And as we've been doing throughout this entire stream, we have a whole team here that's helping us, swapping in and out and helping with comms. So we have a familiar voice joining us here. You probably heard them earlier on stream, here and there throughout the stream. Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor for NASA Spaceflight. Chris, how are you doing? I know you've got to be like just shaking.
Well, we did my baseline heart rate a few hours ago. It was 65 beats per minute, and when I just checked it, it was 113. So my body is transitioning for terminal count. I can tell you that. And Jack is at 115. Oh, we're heart rate buddies. Nice. But yeah. So I know I know they're testing the connectivity of the rocket with the range right now after the reset, and we're going to be aiming for a new T0 here within the window. But I mean, I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm feeling all of the real thing I really didn't expect. I didn't expect it to feel exactly like shuttle when it was in its T-9 minute hold, and it feels exactly like that. The butterflies, the not knowing what to do, the legs shaking as you're getting close to this. It is just you're just getting ready if you know what's coming for that very, very visceral experience once the RS-25s and the solid rockets ignite. And I am definitely, my excitement is definitely arcing, and I'm sure you can hear it in my voice.
I can't wait
certainly
for.
can, and I can feel it sitting next to you. I do get just a quick word also from our live stream production team that they have had their final debrief on the launch sequence for today's broadcast. So I'm going to leave you on the capable hands of not just Chris Gebhardt, but also Hagen Warren and Philip Sloss. They are our liftoff commentary crew for the launch of Artemis 1. Hoping to get a new T0 here shortly, and we'll be watching from here at the press site. Stay tuned.
Yes, thank you so much, Thomas. Of course, that's Thomas Berghardt, news director here at NASA Spaceflight. He's out in the field at the press site near Launch Complex 39B, where SLS is currently standing, as you can see there. He's been with us throughout the night answering questions, and he's getting ready. He's hopping off stream to prepare for launch. This count, Chris, really seems to have gone a lot smoother than the others. It feels like we've had less issues with this, knock on wood, don't want to jinx anything. But really, it feels like they've really nailed down the process here through the last few attempts.
It really, really does, Hagen. And, one thing that I'm sure we've stressed on the stream, and that I just want to say too, is, like the valve that was sort of giving them problems a little bit earlier, that they had to send the red team out to go remove and replace, hey, if that's all we got, and that was the biggest issue from the actual ground systems at Pad B, that's incredible. Range issues happen. It is weird that you could talk about an Ethernet distribution box being the issue that could delay you, but the range has had issues before. The final flight of the shuttle Discovery, STS-133, had a massive range issue that resulted in them launching with 1 second remaining in the launch window. So range issues do happen. They are rare, but they happen. So, the fact that they fueled the core stage with no major reported issues is wonderful. The fact that they got the tank back into its propellant, it's really working good so far. I agree.
Yes. All right, we have a few questions here that I've been pulling from chat. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, if you do want to ask us a question, especially as we get closer to the end of the count here, tag us at NASA Spaceflight in chat, and we can read it. We have here's a good question here. We're in a current hold right now. We're holding at T-minus 10 minutes. Is this a bad thing, Chris, or is this a good thing?
It is good. So SLS...
There's a sensor that came loose, and so there's a little bit of a debris issue, and apparently there's another issue with the sensor. So I guess they're still looking at that. We'll see if Alex or Adrian has anything to add about that. That they're listening to the commentary, but I'm not sure. It didn't sound like it. Have they cleared it yet, Chris?
Actually, stand by. Adrian is typing. Yes. So Adrian says that according to the update, they did an analysis on the trajectory again on those parts. There is no ongoing concern about that. Is the update that we were fed here. So. Sounds like something they're going to discuss, and discuss the rationale just to make sure they've got it, but that the previous trajectory analysis seems to support that we're okay from that standpoint.
Right. Well, and so they've got some extra time to talk about that while they're waiting for waiting for these other two things to get completely ready to go.
Exactly right, Philip. Sometimes your issues collaborate to make it easier for you.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like the integration console is busy tonight, but I don't think they would have expected anything else for the first launch of this vehicle. So they're working at least these 3 issues at this point, and there may be some other minor ones, but yeah, we're
And
just.
then
I
according
think
to
we're still waiting for a new T0 time. Then it sounds like.
And that's exactly what we are being told, is that basically where we are now, again, in the count, and the process is that they are evaluating the work that still needs to happen to establish the new T0. And then after that, buckle up, folks, after that is the go, no go poll. We might actually reach the go, no go poll for SLS tonight. And a new T0 has been set for 1:45 a.m., which is the no earlier than. It's not the official T0, but it's the earliest that they could potentially go if they get the go, if the polls are correct, and everything like that. So that is the launch team's rough calculation of when SLS might be ready at the end of its terminal count here. But we will wait for that to become official. But the thinking right now from the launch team is 1:45 is the no earlier than target.
Right, which is about 30 minutes from now. And, if you're looking at kind of how you get to there, that means that they would need to pick up the clock at 1:35, which is about 20 minutes from now, which means that in the space of the next 20 minutes, they need to get make sure they're ready to go for these 3 problems, and then do all the polls. So, even though that seems like a long time, 30 minutes, they got to get quite a bit of tasks done in that period of time.
Yes. So,
Um,
And 20 minutes can evaporate quickly when you're trying to do
Right.
all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And as they were saying, that's an estimate, and I think I don't know if that was an exact quote from Launch Control, but it's being underlined that that's a no earlier than T0 time.
And of course that means
The launch director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Aurorium Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS Orion and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range Weather.
Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch.
Copy, LWO. And Mission Manager. And Mission Manager, Launch Director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager on 232. The mission management team has been polled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great
Show 064744 is the new liftoff time.
Yes, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
Show 064744 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
Okay.
I think I heard the T0 was 064744. Did you guys hear that? That's based on the pickup time. So something like that.
Something like that, yes.
That would be in UTC, obviously.
But folks, just to provide a brief update,
1:47:44 a.m. EST. Yes.
there you go. Artemis 1 has entered terminal count. We are at less than T-minus 10 minutes away, T-minus 9 minutes now till the launch of Artemis 1. Do we want to walk through real quick what's going to be happening in these next 9 or so minutes?
Yeah, I'm actually going to turn that over to Philip. I am getting way too emotional to speak.
Well, I think we're
need to
gonna
go get ready to actually
All right.
for the liftoff. So I'm going to hand it off to Philip, and good luck, everyone.
All right, and I'm
Chris.
not gonna. We definitely we only have a few minutes here, but basically, there are not too many milestones or major milestones until T-minus 6 minutes. But at 6 minutes, they'll start pressurizing the tanks in the core stage, and then they will at 4 minutes the core stage auxiliary power units will start. Then they will basically they'll start they'll be pressurizing the core stage tanks. They'll go into this final hydrogen engine bleed about 4 minutes 40 seconds, and basically when we get down to T-minus 6 minutes, you'll start to hear a lot more of these milestones called out. And I think really we just want to we're probably I was planning on just listening to the ground launch sequencer milestones, and hopefully it'll be fairly self-explanatory. If there are any issues, we'll just listen, and we'll try and fill in as we can. But I think at this point, at least my inclination is to just listen to the. We should be hearing mostly just the ground launch sequencer engineer calling out the milestones, and we should probably hear the next one here at the T-minus 6 minute mark. And so I don't know if we have any, if we don't have anything here, but in terms of at the very end, the pre-lift off water will be released about somewhere around 16 seconds before, T-minus 16 seconds. The hydrogen burn igniters, those will be fired at 12 seconds. We'll get the final go for main engine start at 10 seconds, and then the engines will start about just a little bit over 6 seconds before liftoff. And so at that point, things will be going so fast that we'll just be watching. So, but really, we'll hear all these milestones here beginning at T-minus 6 minutes, and hopefully that's all we hear, because that means things are going well. And so we're getting pretty close here to the 6 minute mark in the countdown.
And Philip, just to confirm, I mean, this is 6 minutes, 6 minutes. There's not like another hour of built-in holds or anything, correct?
That's correct. There are no planned holds from here on down.
All right. We're going to keep on listening in. We're listening to the launch loop as well,
go
y'all.
for core stage tank pressurization.
There we go. So that's the 6 minutes, and so that's what we're doing. Let me just look here. So the next milestone that we should hear would be at the T-minus 5 minute point, and that'll be go for FTS arm, so the flight termination system that will be armed for flight at 5 minutes. And so if I'll try and duck in some of these when we have a little space, but as we get closer to liftoff, we're obviously the events are gonna the pace of events are gonna pick up.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
Okay, the next milestone will be at 4 minutes 40 seconds here quickly. That'll be go for, I don't know if he's going to say LH2, but go for high flow bleed.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
All right, there we go. And the next milestone will be at 4 minutes, which will be go for APU start on the core stage. And so as long as that's all we're hearing, things are going well.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
And you can hear the APUs. A little bit of chugging from the APUs. I don't know if we'll be able to see the exhaust that's way down at the bottom of the stage. If we have a shot of the engines, we might be able to show a little bit of that. Let me see if I can. I just need to bring up the big picture here. You see those jets coming out from in between the engines. Those are it's cold gas APU exhaust, and those are basically running on a spin start helium system right now. We should be coming up to purge sequence 4. That's the next GLS milestone.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
And so the next milestone will be at 2 minutes 30 seconds. They will start to do the final thrust vector control gimbal check of the core stage engines, and you might even be able to hear the APU exhaust kind of spool up and spool down as the engines are moved around here. So we should see that on this camera relatively easily. And there they go. You could.
GLS is go for upper stage to internal power.
There we go. And so the core stage and the upper stage tanks are being pressurized for flight at this point. The next milestone is at 1 minute 30 seconds. Is go for core stage to internal power, and that's a big milestone. If we go past that point, we won't be able to. We would have to recycle if they have an issue.
GLS is go for core stage to internal power.
Everything's still go though, so I'm not sure if we're going to hear just a call out at 1 minute or not. We may just hear the GLS. If in that case, well, let's wait here.
1 minute.
There we go. And so the next milestone is the final handoff. It's go for ALS, which stands for Autonomous Launch Sequence, and that's when the ground launch sequencer will hand off to the SLS flight computers. That'll be at 33 seconds. And once that happens, I will stop talking.
GLS is go for ALS.
$20. 15. 10.
GLS is go for core stage engine start.
Stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in mission control. 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members, we just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange. We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good. Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines. The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight. 5 minutes and 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust. Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston. As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down. "30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down. Now 7 minutes 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff. And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, I don't think we're Megan and Kayla here, but they do have friends at Kennedy Space Center. Let's see if we can't get Hayden and Philip back into commentary.
That was nuts.
Is everybody still here?
I am.
That was nuts.
Admittedly a mess, but so yeah, folks, Orion is on its way to the moon. Artemis 1 is on its way to the moon, as you saw there, SLS, the Space Launch System, beautifully and successfully lifted off of Launch Complex 39B at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It appeared to be a clean ascent. SRB burnout and separation was beautiful. It looked very clean. And as we saw there, all indications show that separation of the core stage from the interim cryogenic propulsion stage were good. So
let's see if we can't check in, Hagen, with the folks out in the field.
Yeah.
I know we heard
I'm
from
ready
Jack
to hear Chris G.
briefly. I think Chris G is going to be coming back in. I want to
Chris
hear.
G is here. He's getting on comms. He is. I think he's composing himself. That was. The sound. The sound was almost scary for a moment there. It went. We're on our way to the moon. Congratulations to NASA. I'm working on a video right now. The emotions at the press site were utterly insane. I mean, people were expressing happiness and elation at launch, like I've never heard or felt at any other launch that I've ever attended or witnessed. I'm just kind of wow. What a,
I think we're all in a state of shock right now.
What a vehicle! What a launch! How great was that?
Chris, I want to hear from you. You've been waiting for this day for over a decade. How was it?
Everything I wanted it to be.
It was everything I wanted it to be. Oh my gosh, when the boosters lit, that was just, oh my gosh, when the boosters lit and they did their overpressure thing on the back end, and just the sound, the light, I mean, it was everything I remembered and more, and it was an incredible start to this 26-day mission, and no one can say that SLS doesn't work. SLS works, and SLS is the most powerful rocket we have that has ever flown, and yes! Yes, Orange Rocket, good, yes, oh my gosh. That's my initial reaction.
Okay, do we have Philip back with us? I'm sure he is just as
Oh shoot!
elated.
How did I get muted? I was, if I've been muted the whole time, I apologize. But I mean, I would say to me, we waited a long time. It took them a while to get everything to line up, but that's why they waited this long, is because they wanted it to be a clean, boring launch. And this is only the first half of it, but these are the systems that they've been working with for a while. The boosters and the core stage seem to have worked perfectly. And so this is what they wanted. They wanted a clean launch. This is, it's a flight test. It's only one launch, but they wanted to launch in the middle of their in the sweet spot, to give it the best chance of success. And at least, we're just talking about the core stage and the boosters, but that's the base of the SLS, and they both performed, almost flawlessly. We didn't hear of any issues going uphill at all.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say, because this is the emotional part for me. My generation has now seen a human-rated vehicle launch to the moon and launch to another planet, another celestial body. That is the emotional moment. Like, for so many people who remember Apollo and saw it with their own eyes, and to those of us who weren't here yet, this was an incredible moment to experience. I mean, like you were saying earlier, Sawyer, the combination of Apollo 4 and Apollo 8 in a very interesting...
Back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries. The ground launch sequencer will hand off. The count continues. The SLS flight computer. A note now, shortly after liftoff.
No, I'm at 40 seconds. What are you talking about?
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the Autonomous Launch Sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. The ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2 seconds.
Go for ALS.
And we will go for ALS.
Oh,
the Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon.
Booster ignition.
Launch team can no longer cycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML.
So slow.
And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
It's like a sparkler.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass the max Q. 1 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
They can't see.
SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour.
How
mission
fast?
control. 4 core stage engines throttling down ahead
I
of
thought you
passing
said
max
1,000 something.
Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles
2,800
per
miles
hour.
per hour.
The 4 core stage engines are back
Right.
at maximum thrust.
Standing by for solid.
The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour.
Engines firing, traveling over 3,800 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Standing by for solid rocket booster
3,400
jettison
miles.
shortly thereafter.
400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston.
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
It's like they're in a tank.
2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight.
They're not showing any
Hearing
footage
nominal
from
calls
the
here in
actual
Mission Control
rocket.
Houston.
No,
We've still
it's
got
fake.
4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15-foot fairing panels, providing structural support,
Oh, there we
protecting
go.
the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation.
We just cut her off.
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling
that
over
supposed to be the target,
4,060
the moon?
miles per hour, 83 miles downrange.
We just heard the call for 3 engine press.
We just had
If
confirmation
SLS
that
were
the
to
service
lose an
module
engine at
fairing
this
has
point in the mission,
separated.
we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff. However, we still have 4 good engines.
And that the
all
launch
at
abort
maximum
system
thrust
pyros
right now,
They just went to
firing,
CGI.
separating those
of
from
Artemis
Orion
at
as well.
200 miles
For future
per
crew
hour,
members,
100 miles downrange.
we just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange.
Oh no, not that again.
Yeah.
Continue to fire.
We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good.
Orbit upgraded capability for launching the future of space flight.
Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now at 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines.
Again, we are anticipating main engine cutoff.
The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight.
The propulsion stage will be flying free.
5 minutes and 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center.
Houston, teams continue to monitor this first flight.
Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at
Are
which
they
point
really
Orion
checking
and the interim cryogenic
Until that
propulsion
core stage
stage will be
engine
flying
cutoff
free.
time, our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust.
Now traveling over
Holy
10,000
mackerel.
miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight.
Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour.
12,800 miles per hour.
Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston.
About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust.
As we prepare for main cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down.
Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston.
Continue to throttle down.
As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down.
Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff.
Now, at least SpaceX tries. Wait.
30 seconds now
Why
until
am I
core
looking
stage
at the
main
moon?
engine cutoff.
Close up.
All 4 engines
It
continue
didn't
to
reach it
throttle
yet, did
down.
it?
And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion, and it's now in Earth's orbit.
Now 7 minutes 45
The flight
seconds into the
dynamics
flight,
officer
traveling over
a nominal
16,000
main
miles per
engine
hour.
cutoff.
They're just showing
And we just heard the
CGI.
call for core stage
Well, they got no
separation.
cameras on the
Continuing to hear
damn
good
thing?
calls here
Orion
in
and
Mission
the interim
Control Houston.
cryogenic propulsion stage are now
We're
flying
standing
free
by for
from the
core
core
stage
of the Space
main engine
Launch
cutoff.
System. The next milestone will be solar array
Okay.
deployment approximately 18 minutes after liftoff.
Okay.
Let me know. I'll check in the morning to see what
And we have
if
confirmation
anyone
of core stage
fired
main
back
engine
any
cutoff.
images. But
Orion
Well,
is
there's
now in Earth's orbit.
the only thing I got to say about the
The
damn
flight
thing
dynamics
is they
officer
have
reports that we
no
have a nominal main
footage of
engine
the launch
cutoff.
itself.
And we
Minus
just
the
heard the
camera
call
on
for
the
core
ground.
stage
cameras.
separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy
right.
approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at
That's
Kennedy
the
Space
actual
Center
rocket.
and
Show
hear all
something.
about
That's
what it
the
was
actual
like to
ship that's
hear the
going to the
rocket
moon.
roar off
all
the
right, guys,
launch pad.
keep me
Megan and
posted. Send me
Kayla, I've
links
got
if
to
you
hear
got
all
them.
about it.
I'll talk
Well,
to
if
you
you're
morning.
just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we
Well,
just
no, that's
watched
CGI of
Artemis
what the
1
ship's
launch,
supposed
our
to look
first
like
step
out
towards our next
They have-
adventure into deep space. As Leah said, I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA.
We have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries.
The ground launch sequencer will hand off
The count
to
continues.
the SOS flight computer.
A note now, shortly after liftoff.
No, I'm at 40 seconds. What are you talking about?
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket,
36,
and my
35.
colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS
I'm at
will hand off
25
control to
seconds.
the ALS. This is the Autonomous Launch Sequencer. On board the rocket,
20
it will
seconds
take
behind.
over command and control
Damn New Yorkers.
of the rocket.
Ten
The ALS
seconds
will check,
go. We're
make sure
lighting
there's
them
no
up.
holds
5,
coming from the ground up until T-minus 2
GLS,
seconds.
let's go for ALS.
And we will go
3,
for ALS.
2,
So,
The Space
pretty
Launch
far.
System is now counting down
That's
to liftoff
0.
of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon.
There's the water.
booster ignition.
Launch team can no longer cycle the count.
Okay.
Sound suppressor water now
Shit, it took
fully
off.
under the ML.
So slow.
And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1.
It's pretty
We
at
rise
night, though.
together back to the moon and beyond.
It's like a sparkler.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass the max Q. About 1 minute and 9 seconds into the launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
Say you can't see.
SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops of Mission Control. The 4 core stage engines throttling down ahead of
thought you said 1,000 something.
Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420
2,800 miles per hour.
The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust.
Standing by for solid.
The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour.
Engines firing, traveling over 3,800 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison shortly thereafter.
400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston.
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight.
They're not showing any
Hearing
footage
nominal
from
calls
the
here in
actual
Mission Control
rocket.
Houston.
No,
We've
I
still got
like
4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation.
We just cut her off.
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange.
We just heard the call for 3 engine press.
We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated.
We could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff.
Apogee, perigee, that sort of stuff, or velocities or anything.
Are we getting any sound at all, or?
It seems like a longer burn too.
It could be adjusted based on, again, it would be based on performance of the core stage.
At least there's the confirmation that they are pointed aft.
Yeah, the audio that we're getting isn't exactly explaining what's going on here right now. And I guess their timeline on the bottom isn't advancing incrementally. It just sort of jumps to the next stage. It doesn't show like halfway through the burn or anything. It's just going to jump.
And I'm not sure if this indicates that we're burning or not. Okay. Oh, well, we're hearing in the back that they're 2 minutes to. Well, is that an update? Are they hearing that from the update?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out exactly what the update is here, folks. Oh my gosh, I have like 15 screens filled with Jack Black right now.
Oh boy.
Sorry, Philip, I don't have any telemetry updates for you. But if you want to hear about the greatest launch in the world, I think this...
You beat me to it. You
could
beat
be
me
it.
to it.
It's not just a tribute, Jack. Sorry.
But here's the thing, they have Jack Black.
And then, yeah, that re-entry is...
Oh boy.
Yeah. We're continuing to try and listen in on those updates. Y'all will definitely pass them on as soon as we can. But I think we got like a Twitter plug there to follow their social media, and then Mr. Jack Black doing some commentary.
I think the graphic though is probably represents that is probably the solar array orientation for the burn.
Yeah, makes sense. Would that engine be chilling down or something? That might be what they're illustrating here, or
maybe. I mean, maybe we'll see here, but that I don't remember it pre-start being that long for. But again, we're used to the way that this is used on Delta is that it's during the ascent, and so the main engine starts probably within 10-15 seconds of separating from the Delta IV common booster core. So it's unusual for the stage to take what is this, almost 45 minutes from separation to its first ignition. But it is possible that this is like a pre-start sequence on the engine.
Yeah, I think part of the confusion here is that the little indicator moved to PRM burn, and then we saw the animation that seemed to be something coming out of the engine. It doesn't look like engine exhaust to me, though. It doesn't seem like it's big enough, but they moved it to PRM burn, which made us believe that maybe that burn had started, but listening in, we're not getting a lot of updates.
Okay, she just called out. She said about 2 minutes to the burn.
There you go. Okay.
So I don't know I'm not sure exactly what that graphic is. She's talking about. I need to turn that down a little bit. So she's talking about just so that. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is, but yeah, we'll definitely want to. So many questions to.
Keep watching.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously the big, these big picture questions. There will be a post-launch press conference, but it's probably going to be well after the TLI burn, which is a ways away. But we'll definitely want to hear how to get some sense of just how good did the core stage perform, the ground systems, the boosters, the ICPS. Because it's interesting, with we were getting 51 minutes, 51 and a half minutes for the ignition time for the burn. And so, if it's a little different than that, is that better? Is that worse? It's within, I'm sure it's within margins, but it is just kind of interesting.
Gotcha. I think we're coming up on less than a minute. Yeah, now we've got less than a minute before the burn. I do hope the animation changes significantly when the burn begins, right?
That'd be nice.
Well, she's
today's mission, and we are standing by for the start of the perigee raise maneuver. Again, this is a firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. It's less than 30 seconds long.
We got that audio from NASA for a little bit, but now they've stopped sending it to us again. But we got some information. The perigee raise maneuver burn.
She's probably waiting.
Look at this.
Okay, and that's probably the ignition.
And we have confirmation of perigee raise maneuver ignition and full thrust. This is a live view from the spacecraft. Again, a really short burn. We're standing by for the cutoff.
So Philip, this looks like a solar array sort of wiggling after
they'll flex based on the thrust.
Yeah.
Wow. It almost looks like a render or something. This is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it's almost like a resonance.
Yeah.
And we have confirmation of perigee raise maneuver cutoff. Flight Dynamics Officer reporting on the loops here at Mission Control Houston that it was a good burn. We are now 54 minutes into the flight, Orion traveling 14,700 miles per hour, and that was the perigee raise maneuver, lifting the lowest part of Orion's orbit around the Earth and putting us right where we want to be for the translunar injection burn. We're looking for that translunar injection burn to happen about 1 hour and 26 minutes after launch, so about 30 minutes from now. That'll be that long burn that helps us break free from the pull of Earth's gravity and commits the spacecraft to a lunar trajectory.
There you have it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So all right, so we have half an hour here. But that was interesting, yeah, to see a little bit of the solar arrays, that motion with the RL-10 burning.
Philip, how long, that next burn that's coming up, the TLI burn, how long is that supposed to be? This was a shorter burn. Is there a longer burn coming up next?
Yeah, oh yeah. The
All the way to the moon.
TLI was on the order of 18 minutes long. It's a really long burn. It's like you basically, instead of using these upper stages, you'll use, maybe 25% or a third of it to get into that parking orbit in for some of these other payloads, and then you might do a 3 burn insertion into like a geostationary transfer orbit. This one is just this little. It's like a little blip of this engine just to raise the perigee up, and then they're basically going to almost burn it to depletion to get Orion to the moon. And so, yeah, I mean that's the payoff certainly for SLS. And so, really, at this point, Orion is still along for the ride, and Orion's mission really doesn't start until spacecraft separation. So, I mean, it's active right now, and they're monitoring the systems, and they had to be go for launch. But for SLS. Mission success, just like for most launchers, you're waiting until spacecraft separation, and they need to get the payoff is that they're on the way to the moon, and so that's what the TLI burn is all about.
All right, I think we still have some of the shots that the photographers captured out there. Since we're on the animation here now, let's see if we can't bring up a shot, I think, from Julia Bergeron. There we go. Of course, all these are over on Twitter, folks. So if we have mods around, let's make sure we can get the links to some of these over into chat. But this is a shot of liftoff again that Julia Bergeron posted over on Twitter. I like the reflection.